They say that in 1849, the wind that passed through Sutter's field could speak, not in words, but in knocks. 1, 2, 3, and then silence. Always 3, always at night. No one remembers the exact day the barn fell silent. But the story of Ellis House and the girl who knocked still survives, buried in the parish records of Jackson County, Georgia. It was the kind of story families stopped telling because it remembered them back. The plantation had burned in 1864. Yet, long before Sherman's men ever came, it was already cursed. The journals of Reverend Amos Braxton, dated 1849, speak of a child born in darkness who speaks in echoes. The entry ends abruptly. She knocks beneath my floorboards at night. Says her mama is burning. That child's name was Clara, a slave girl born to a woman called Mara, who was known only by her scars and her silence. And one night, when thunder split the Georgia sky, Clara appeared at her master's door, bleeding, trembling, and whispering only. He killed my mama in the barn. When the house was excavated in 1923 by the Georgia Historical Society, they found the remains of a half-burnt ledger beneath the main staircase. The first page, still legible, bore the plantation's name, Ellis Cotton and Sons. The second, written in a trembling hand, read, Entry number 47. Mara, sold at Augusta, defiant, to be broken. But the handwriting changed after that entry. The ink darker, the strokes uneven. At the bottom of the page, a single word was carved with a knife, not written. Mama. Historians dismissed it as graffiti, a child's word carved in grief. But those who worked the dig swore the wood was new, as if it had been carved that morning. The lead researcher, Dr. Henrietta Lyle, later reported hearing knocks from within the barn foundation while cataloging debris. Her assistant recorded her whispering, "Someone's still inside." She was found unconscious hours later, clutching the ledger to her chest, nails blackened as if burned. The report was sealed. A church bell tolls once. Silence follows. Reverend Amos Braxton was not a cruel man, at least not in the open. His writings, discovered in 1932 in a condemned church, tell of a spiritual sickness that took root at Ellis House. He described nightly screams from the barn, as though something alive was being taught to forget its name. The Reverend confessed to visiting the barn after midnight, following the sound of 3 knocks. Inside, he claimed to find a small girl sitting in the straw, hands clasped tight, blood streaking her dress. She said, "He made Mama sleep in the fire. Said she don't belong nowhere no more." Braxton's next sermon would damn the entire plantation, speaking of sins too deep for God's soil. Days later, he vanished. Only one entry remains in his journal, dated April 6, 1850. They've buried the truth beneath the boards of his house. If I speak, he'll burn me too. The last page smelled faintly of smoke. Cicadas, faint thunder. In 1892, nearly 50 years after the fire, a new farmhouse was built over the ruins of Ellis House. Locals refused to build near the barn's foundation, claiming the earth still sweated at night. But a tenant family, the Rileys, ignored the warnings. Their youngest, Samuel, would wake screaming about a girl knocking from under the ground. At first, they thought it was night terrors. But one night, when Samuel's father pressed his ear to the barn floor, he heard it too. 3 knocks, a pause, then a faint, wet whisper. "Mama's burning again." The next morning, the family's livestock were found dead, piled against the barn door from the inside. By winter, the Rileys had vanished. The property was auctioned to the county, listed in the deeds as inhabitable. To this day, no buyer has ever rebuilt there. Faint projector hum. Static. In 1938, an unnamed WPA photographer captured a black and white image of the site. The picture shows only the barn's skeletal remains, but on the left edge of the frame, almost out of view, a blurred figure of a girl stands facing the lens. Her dress appears scorched at the hem. Her eyes, pale voids. Photographic experts called it a light leak. But the photographer himself, a man named Eli Crane, never agreed. He told the press the image ruined him. Crane was later admitted to a sanitarium in Alabama, where he repeatedly drew the same shape on his walls. A barn door, 3 dots, and a hand reaching from beneath. On the night before his death, nurses recorded his final words, muttered like a prayer. "She keeps knocking. Someone has to open." Film reel stops. Low drone builds. Low archival hiss. Faint shuffle of papers. In 1941, a field investigator named Thomas Levitt from the Works Progress Administration was assigned to document southern ruins of cultural value. He was 29, a soft-spoken veteran of the Dust Bowl who believed in facts, not ghosts. When Levitt reached Sutter's field, he found nothing but reeds, ash, and the remains of the Ellis Foundation. Still, the locals warned him not to stay after sundown. That night, his field diary records this. 3 knocks at my tent post. I thought it was the wind. But then came a child's voice, low, like someone whispering through water. My mom is still in the barn. He searched the site with a lantern. The light caught the charred ribs of the old barn door, half buried in mud. Beneath it, bones, not animal. Small ones. He wrote one more line before his entry ends abruptly. They tried to bury her voice. Levitt was never seen again. His camera was recovered days later. The film inside melted and black. A match strikes. Silence. The following year, Sheriff Henry Godwin of Jackson County filed a private letter to the state board, one never meant for public eyes. He claimed that Levitt's disappearance had forced him to revisit Ellis property records from the 1850s. Among them, he found a death ledger containing dozens of unnamed slaves, all marked with a single cause, reclamation. Godwin's letter reads like the unraveling of a guilty man. The barn was no barn, he wrote. It was a room of discipline and correction, blessed by Reverend Braxton himself. They said it was to purify sin, but it was a killing house. He confessed that his own grandfather, sheriff during the war, had ordered the barn burned, not to destroy sin, but to hide what was buried inside. Godwin ended his letter with a plea. If anyone goes near that place again, tell them to listen before they dig. If they hear knocking, stop. He shot himself 3 days later. Soft projector hum. Faint static crackle. In 1947, archivists at the University of Georgia found a forgotten film reel in Levitt's old desk. It was labeled simply, Sutter's Field, Evidence. Most of the footage was damaged, warped by heat. But in the last 20 seconds, just before the film burns, a sequence emerges. A barn doorway. A flicker of light. Then, a figure, a young girl, no more than 10, moving toward the camera. Her hands are clasped. Her mouth moves, but no sound emerges. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed something impossible. Behind her, the barn's beams breathe, expanding and contracting like lungs. When the reel ends, the final frame lingers, the girl's face close, eyes wide, whispering what appears to be, "He's still here." Archivists destroyed the reel soon after. But a student projectionist who viewed it first was later institutionalized. He refused to sleep in silence, demanding constant radio static in his room. When asked why, he said, "If it's quiet, she knocks again." A choir hum fades into low wind. In 1950, an old church registry surfaced during renovations in Milledgeville. Within its fragile pages lay an unrecorded baptismal entry. Child, Clara Mara. Born of sin. Cleansed in fire. The Reverend's name was listed as Amos Braxton. Investigators discovered that Braxton had performed multiple fire baptisms, rituals never sanctioned by the church, involving enslaved women accused of rebellion. His notes, found later, described them as purifications of lineage. He wrote, "The Lord told me the blood must speak through the child. Her mother's screams were offerings. The daughter is the vessel. That vessel was Clara, the same girl who knocked. No one knows how she survived the night her mother was killed, but by dawn, the barn was ablaze and Braxton gone. The church, terrified of scandal, sealed the registry for nearly a century. Some say the barn's fire was no accident. Others whisper it was Clara who lit it, the only way to silence the thing her master called purification. But the knocking never stopped. Distant thunder. Slow footsteps in dry grass. By the late 1950s, the site of Ellis House was all but erased from county maps. But one man, Dr. Roland Keene, an anthropologist obsessed with American hauntology, traced its legend through oral histories. Locals told him of black ash that rose from the ground each year near August, when the heat made the soil breathe. The ash would collect around the barn's footprint, forming patterns like fingerprints. Dr. Keene took samples. When analyzed, the results came back as carbon mixed with human bone dust. But more disturbing were the recordings. He had left a reel-to-reel tape running overnight inside the ruins. At 3:03 a.m., 3 sharp knocks echoed through the recorder, followed by a voice faint as wind through nails. Mama says the fire never went out. The following morning, the barn's outline in the soil had shifted, now resembling the shape of an open door. Dr. Keene sealed the tape in his archives. He never published his findings. When asked why, he only said, "Because she's still waiting for someone to answer." Wind fades. Silence. Tape click. Hum of an old recorder. In 1961, a young psychologist from Emory University, Dr. Laura Finch, began a research project on inherited fear and Southern folklore. Her interest led her to Sutter's Field, where she interviewed descendants of those who once lived near the old Ellis property. Her notes show an unsettling pattern. Every witness, regardless of age or education, mentioned the girl who knocks. One woman, born in 1898, described hearing tapping under her childhood bed. Another recalled her grandmother forbidding anyone to whistle at night, saying, "It calls her to your door." Dr. Finch grew obsessed. She wrote, "I don't believe in ghosts, but the fear here behaves like a memory passed through blood." During her final visit to the site, she brought a group of graduate students. Audio recovered from their reel captures Finch whispering, "Something's moving under the floor." 3 knocks follow, then chaos. The reel ends in silence, except for a single child's breath close to the microphone. Finch's students were found the next morning, disoriented, covered in soot. Dr. Finch herself was missing. All they remembered was the smell of iron and a girl's voice saying, "Mama said don't let him in." A reel-to-reel clicks on, then static. In 1963, Emory archivists cataloging Dr. Finch's effects discovered one unmarked tape. No label, no date, only the faint smell of smoke. The first 40 seconds are ordinary field sounds: wind, insects, footsteps. Then, 3 knocks, a pause, and Finch's voice, trembling. "Who's there?" A whisper responds, faint but clear. "Mama's gone." He still comes. There's a shuffling, a gasp, and then what sounds like flames breathing. The tape snaps. When technicians repaired it and played it again weeks later, the sound changed. No knocks this time, only the faint rhythm of a heartbeat. One technician claimed to hear a child's humming layered beneath, an old plantation lullaby titled "Go Down, Mama." Those who handled the tape said it felt warm to the touch. It vanished from university archives in 1965. Faint fire crackle, storm in distance. On July 8, 1966, the old Ellis site ignited again. Locals saw flames rising from the ground where the barn once stood, though no structure remained. Firefighters arrived to find the earth itself burning, cracks in the soil glowing red like veins. In the ashes, investigators found a small iron cross, warped and blackened. It matched designs used by plantation clergy in the 1840s, the kind Braxton was known to bless before his purifications. A reporter covering the story noted something chilling in his article draft, later removed by editors. "I saw footprints in the soot. Small, barefoot, leading toward the river. Each one smoked when I touched it." That reporter, Samuel Dyer, disappeared a week later while walking home. His notebook was recovered beside the Oconee River, pages wet but legible. On the last page, "The barn keeps rebuilding itself at night." Church bell tolls. Then static. By the early 1970s, Jackson County attempted to rebrand itself for tourism. Maps redrew borders. Old towns vanished. But one section of land, the 5 acres that once held the Ellis plantation, was left blank. On county records, it's filed as zone null. Surveyors who entered reported equipment failure, nausea, and an unbearable sense of being watched. One man described hearing the rhythmic sound of a woman breathing through the soil. Another claimed the land tilted, as though it were alive. When asked what he meant, he said, "It wants to stand again, like it remembers itself." That year, 3 families living nearby left without notice. Their houses were found unlocked, dinner plates still set on the tables, radios still playing hymns. The sheriff's report closed the case as voluntary relocation. But the new deputy who wrote the file left a note for his successor. "You can rename the county. You can bury the records, but you can't quiet her knocking." Faint hum of a film projector. Slow breath. In 1978, a small documentary team from Atlanta Public Television attempted to produce a feature called Haunted Georgia. Only fragments of their footage survive. It shows an interview with Eleanor Braxton, an 83-year-old woman, great-granddaughter of Reverend Amos Braxton. She agreed to speak on camera for the first time. Her voice quivers as she confesses. "My daddy told me never to say her name. Said she was born wrong. Said her mama cursed the bloodline. But she's still here. We still hear her when it rains." The interviewer asks, "You mean Clara?" Eleanor goes silent. Her eyes shift to something unseen beyond the camera. Then she whispers, "Don't say it out loud. She don't like being remembered." The lights flicker. The microphone hums violently. Eleanor stands, trembling, and says one last thing before the tape cuts to static. She knocks to see who remembers her mama's name. The crew abandoned the project. All copies of Haunted Georgia were destroyed. Wind over microphones. Metal scraping soil. In 1985, a state-funded archaeology class from Athens was sent to perform a survey on the zone null acreage. They expected pottery, maybe foundations. What they found was a door. Buried 6 feet under clay, a rectangular frame of iron and oak, intact, its hinges fused by rust. It measured exactly the size of a barn door. As they lifted it, the ground exhaled, a deep hollow breath that made one student vomit. The air smelled of soot and iron. Their supervising professor, Dr. Roland Keene, had returned for the first time since his 1950s recordings. His notes from that day end with, "The knocking stopped the moment we broke the soil. The silence felt like waiting." That night, the excavation tent collapsed inward. The door they'd unearthed was gone. Only a rectangular void remained, dark as oil. Inside it, someone had carved letters into the dirt wall. M-A-M-A. Radio static swelling, then cutting to a calm announcer's tone. 2 weeks later, local AM station WJCK received a reel-to-reel package postmarked Athens Field Office. No sender. When aired accidentally during a midnight weather segment, listeners heard 3 knocks, followed by a child's voice repeating the same words for nearly a minute. He made her sleep in the fire. Switchboards flooded with calls. Some said their radios overheated. Others swore they smelled smoke. The FCC forced the station to destroy the tape, but bootlegs circulated through college dorms for years. Students who played it claimed that, at exactly the 13th replay, a second voice joined in. Older, rasping, whispering over the child's. "Don't open the barn." Within months, the transmitter on that frequency burned out in a storm. Dusty office sounds, soft ticking clock. In 1992, Margaret Lyle, granddaughter of Dr. Henrietta Lyle, discovered her grandmother's sealed research trunk. Inside were burned photographs, a fragment of the Ellis ledger, and a child's dress, singed but perfectly folded. Pinned to it was a note. She wanted to be seen. Margaret digitized the photos for preservation. Each scan produced distortions, shadows forming shapes of hands, faces in the smoke. Then the file names began changing on their own. Knock 1, knock 2, knock 3. The third file wouldn't open. It only played a sound, 3 thuds, and a faint sob that grew into a scream cut short. Margaret's email to a colleague read, "She's not a ghost. She's a memory that refuses to die." Hours later, her apartment building caught fire. Only her computer survived, untouched, screen glowing white. Faint paper rustle, candlelight hum. In 2004, a restoration team working in a Savannah museum discovered a letter pressed between 2 pages of the county's 1849 census book. It was written in a child's hand, spelled unevenly. "Mama said if I keep knocking he'll hear. She said don't cry no more. When he come, I'll show him where she sleep. Then we can go home." At the bottom, a fingerprint, small, black with ash. Carbon dating confirmed the paper matched the 1850s. The letter should have turned to dust long ago, yet the ink was still wet. The archivist who opened the envelope later told reporters, "It wasn't written to God or to any man. It was written to whoever listens." Low heartbeat under static. Narration slows, voice shaking. In 2015, drone footage of Sutter's field resurfaced online. The aerial image shows nothing unusual until frame 326. For 1 second, the ground shifts. The outline of a door appears in the grass, bright red, as if lit from below. Then, 3 faint knocks through the drone's microphone. Viewers flooded forums claiming the sound continued even after the video ended. Some reported hearing it from their speakers hours later. Officials denied any paranormal cause, sealing the area once more under environmental protection orders. But satellite images since then show a widening scar in the earth, shaped like a rectangle. And every year, on the anniversary of the barn fire, local residents say the wind changes. It doesn't howl or whistle. It knocks 3 times, then waits. Long silence. Faint voice of a child. He killed my mama in the barn. Deep inhale. Final line whispered by narrator. And now she's knocking for you. Fade to black. End theme. Low choir, distant thunder.